And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Michael FreeHawk Polani, who has been an experiencer since a very young age and had a profound awakening at the age of 12 in the presence of two interdimensional beings. He is still receiving communication from beings when they feel it's necessary. Michael, thanks for joining me and welcome.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. It is a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, Michael, let's start from the beginning and tell us how this communication started for you.
Well, as you said, a very young age, when I was a child, and I would say 5 to 6 years old, I lived in a home that had a little bit of extra activity in it, and I was well aware of that. The activity was, for me, it was energetic. I felt, then I didn't know, but now I know, I felt beings around me, very palpable. I kind of worked with that for a few years in the way of kind of observing. A couple times I would ask some family members, did you see, hear that? And of course, no. So it was something that I kept to myself. That's really how it began. And really from that point on, I started to feel sensations, and I would say throughout my life, and that did start at that time as a child.
Did you see these beings, or you were just felt like they were in your presence?
It actually started out as just in my presence. Eventually, I did get glimpses of what we now call like shadow people, disembodied spirits, things like that. And it really just consisted of shadows that usually took place at nighttime in the dark. And it's interesting because when I say something like that, people say, well, if it was dark, like how do you see a shadow in the dark? And it's an interesting thing, and people out there who have experienced this know what I'm probably talking about. The shadow is darker than the dark, and there's a contrast between the two darknesses, if that makes sense. So yeah, I did kind of graduate to the visual aspect, and then energetically I started to kind of feel with my hands, and it's a sensation in the palm of my hands that I've just grown accustomed to, and that's when I realized that I was very subtle energies.
Many children, I think, may experience this and have a lot of fear of being alone in the dark, especially at nighttime. Did you have fear as well?
In the beginning, I would say yes. I would be lying if I said I didn't have a little apprehension about the whole thing. And I can tell you the story that comes to mind with that experience is, I'm in my 50s now, so a lot of people my age will remember back in the 70s, late 70s, we would make a big deal about the Saturday morning cartoons. So I convinced my parents at that time, and this is probably 6 to 10 years old, to sleep in the family room on Friday nights. Our couch was a hide-a-bed, and I would sleep in there so I wouldn't miss anything in the morning on Saturday morning cartoon time. So I would wake up before everybody else, and I would turn on the TV very quietly and watch cartoons in the early morning, probably 6, 7 a.m. in the morning, before anybody else got up. There was a time where I was in that hide-a-bed, and there was a being or beings around me for sure. And I did the classic pull the covers over my head. I felt them. They were right there, I would say inches from my face. And it was a little freaky at the time. And I was afraid. But as that kind of went on, not only that evening, but other nights, other times, I did kind of get accustomed to it. The fear wasn't so much there because I felt like they were aware of who I was, what I was doing. And I mean, for all intents and purposes, I felt like they were friendly or benevolent. So I've been lucky in that way and blessed that I haven't had too many negative experiences in my life when it comes to beings visiting and interacting with me.
What do you think their intent was? And did they communicate with you in any way?
At that age, I would say it was more of a, not an initiation period, it was an introduction. It was definitely an awakening for me. They were very, very subtle, very gentle. Again, they were never scary and negative and instilling fear in me as a child. I never got that. My fear was my own at the time. It wasn't anything that was directed at me. So I would say it was a very nice, kind of a gentle introduction to, hey, we're here. You're not the only one that kind of resides in the space, and I got that message loud and clear because that did continue, and I mean, ultimately it moved up to when I was 12 years old. That was the big one. That was when people say, was there any definitive time in your life where you really got kind of broken wide open? 12 years old was it. The typical, very auspicious time of 3:15 a.m. in the morning. I woke up at 3:15 in the morning to a pressure. Best way I can describe it, on my back. I was sleeping on my stomach at the time, and I had a huge digital, one of those red digital clocks on my nightstand, and it was 3:15 in the morning, and I woke up to a pressure between my shoulder blades and the base of my skull. So I say the brain stem area. And when I realized that something was happening, of course, I just kind of froze and just stayed there to see what was going on. And I just kind of made believe I was still asleep, essentially. And that pressure increased, pushing my head into the pillow. And I had my head to the right, so the left side of my face was exposed. And at that age, I had a very large down pillow, one of those really heavy ones, and great for pillow fights back then. And it was kind of like the original memory foam, where if you pressed your head into it or your face into it, it would make an impression. Well, that pressure kept pushing my head very slowly, very methodically, to where it kind of got to the point where I was, all right, I'm a little concerned now. Like there's something going on, and all these things ran through my head. Is it the family dog? I mean, our dog wasn't that large. And I thought, well, maybe dog came in the middle of the night and jumped on the bed and is sleeping on my back, which is not a rare thing for small dogs to do. Right about the time that I thought that, I also remember that I closed the door and I locked my bedroom door usually when I went to bed. My parents didn't really approve of that. They told me many times, please don't close and lock your bedroom door at nighttime. If there's an emergency, we need to get in, just don't do that. Well, that was a night that I obviously didn't listen to that. I did close and lock the door that night. So that quickly was a reminder that there's nothing that could have gotten in this room, and laid there and experienced that. Started to get a little freaked out at a certain point that I couldn't breathe because now my nose was being impaired. The breathing was being impaired from the pressure. And I would say there was a moment where I didn't know if I could actually move if I wanted to, or I couldn't move. And then of course that brings up the question, well, was it a paralysis thing, or was there something that was making you frozen like that, or to freeze? I didn't know that. All I knew is I was getting ready to panic and I was getting ready to freak out and jump out of bed, but I could not move. So right about the nanosecond that I was getting ready to either jump out of bed, if I could, and scream and just run out of there, the pressure started to ease off of that spot on my neck. So I stopped and I observed that. That pressure left the back of my neck. And as soon as the pressure left the back of my neck, I felt a light grazing. It's the best word I could think of, something that grazed the back of my lower leg. So I'd say my calf and my heel or Achilles area. So it was almost like something lifted off of me, exited, and made contact physically with my legs on the way out. That kind of freaked me out as well. And I can tell you in that moment, I chose to close my eyes, pretend that I was still asleep, and I woke up the next morning. It was sunny. There was the smell of, and I always say it was probably a late wee hours of the morning on a Saturday, because I woke up and I smelled like Sunday morning breakfast being made by my mom. So I smelled like the eggs, the bacon, whatever the the typical late 70s, 1980 breakfast was for our family. And it took me a minute to remember what happened. And I looked around my room and I walked out of my bedroom and I went directly into the kitchen before I even went to the bathroom to brush my teeth or anything. I walked in the kitchen and I asked my mom, was she in my bedroom last night? You were dad in my bedroom. And she just kind of gave me the, the quick shake of the head while she continued making breakfast. That was the last moment that I really thought about that occurrence. Years down the road, I was reading a book by Ed Walters, and it was called the Gulf Breeze Sightings, a big flap in the 90s in Florida. And I read a page in that book that described a very similar occurrence, that having a feeling in the bed, something was touching you, something manipulating you, and something grazing the bottom lower half of your legs or the heels. And then I had a total recall. And that was in the 90s. That was in the mid 90s when I read that book, and it just kind of, the floodgates opened. And really from that point on, I started to do my own research. I started to kind of get into that circle of individuals who had experience at this. And that kind of led me on to a great experience of being a volunteer to one of the largest UFO expos on the planet. It's called the Bay Area UFO Expo in the Bay Area between San Francisco and San Jose. And I got to meet pretty much everybody that I ever wanted to meet, have conversations on and off the record. This is a time where people like Stephen Greer were just getting started. I had the pleasure of speaking to people that I hold in very high regard to this day, although they are no longer residing on this planet. People like ex-military Bob Dean, then there's Stanton Friedman, Dr. Roger Lear, all the amazing Wendell Stevens. Wendell was a big one in my life as well. And starting to really look at the information out there, abduction phenomenon, everything associated with that.
So as you process this experience later in life, what do you think happened? I mean, are you saying that it was an ET that was in your room with you, or something else?
Right. Well, initially, I attributed, and it's funny because I will attribute things to my, younger self. And then you look at it through your adult eyes, and then things either look very much the same or they look very different. So back then, I would attribute that experience to a haunting, one of the disembodied spirits that resided in that land that I lived. And it was interesting because that question you asked is something that I've answered before, and it always comes back to it depends on somebody's belief system, either at the time or always, if they're pretty rigid in their belief and they don't change. But if you're a Christian, you'll believe it was something malevolent, something dark, or a demon. If you are a UFO person, you're going to say, oh, it was an ET. If your belief system is there, it tends to have an impact on what you believe it may be. So at the time, I just thought maybe it was a ghost. It was pretty simple, over and done with. It makes sense, and that was it. But I did learn down the road through some good regression work with the very well-known hypnotherapist, Barbara Lamb. Barbara Lamb and I spent hours together kind of dissecting that episode at 12 years old. And what I described, and it's interesting because usually when you start talking about hypnotherapy and all that, people go, gosh, I don't know about that. They can plant things in your brain and maybe it wasn't what you thought. It really wasn't that way. I was aware of everything. I think very differently of people who do work like Barbara Lamb now. It's just really dropping down into a different level of consciousness and retrieving things that your conscious mind can't really retrieve. Your subconscious mind has got a grasp on it, and it always does, but your conscious mind. So it's really making the subconscious conscious, which is very important in healing. Like if you had memories you couldn't retrieve, it's a big part of that. And I guess, not to be redundant on the retrieving of the memories, I want to really impress upon that I was awake. I was aware of what Barbara was asking me. I wasn't, the kind of person to say, oh, she's going to make me cluck like a chicken and run around the room and do weird things. I was very aware of what I was experiencing when I was 12 years old, and it was two different angles. When I was in the bed and me actually looking at myself in the bed, what I retrieved was two, I call them interdimensional beings because they didn't reside only in this dimension. And they came right through the wall. That was my bed at the time, was right up against the wall, kind of like the L shape. And the long side of my bed was up against the wall. And the two beings came directly through the wall. It was a round hole. It was just a dark hole. It's the best way that I can describe it. And the purpose for them being there that I retrieved, and it makes a lot of sense in my conscious mind, because what I found out was the pressure on my neck was what I would refer to almost as like an energetic epidural. I don't know if that makes sense, but that was the only thing that I could feel, because they were actually conducting, if that's a word for that, something in the area of my tailbone, my coccyx. And it's interesting that came up in my regression work with Barbara, is because at that time, I actually had a physical issue that was a result of an ulcerated colon, large intestine. It had to do with bleeding, internal bleeding, that was only really made aware or when I have a bowel movement at that age. There was a lot of blood, and there was issues that weren't really not fixable, but they couldn't figure it out. They didn't know what to do, the doctors, that is. Um, After my experience um, with those beings, that physical issue was no longer present. I've talked to my mom about this, something I never brought up, and we kind of compared timelines and situations. And on one hand, she was like, "Oh no, I think we fixed that another way." We agree on a lot of things, and there's a couple things we disagree on. But the bottom line was, after my experience, that was no longer an issue. Things were no longer a problem. The doctors looked at the same situation and said, "There's really nothing to fix here anymore." My tailbone area does have scars on them, or on it, in a very interesting geometric pattern that today some people would call like their scoop marks, or just evidence of something being done to you physically during that experience. So things started to fit together, and it made perfect sense. The one thing I retrieved out of that regression was probably the most simple thing, and I never noticed it. And this is what regression can actually help you with, are the simple things that you would never think of. And you go, why didn't I ever think of that? So me and Barbara Lamb did hours of regression. And I would say off the top of my head, let's just say it was 5 hours. I never once realized until after the regression was finished, and me and Barbara had kind of our post session and we talked. The digital clock in my bedroom that night, as long as this experience was, my digital clock never changed off of 3:15. And I never thought about that. I said, how? Okay, wait a minute. Why did I never think about that? And through research, talking to other experiencers, you just come to realize that time and space and all of that is just not the same when you're in a different realm, I guess you could say. And some people say, well, you said you were still in your bedroom. Like, what do you mean a different realm? I would say it's almost like that hole in the wall that they came through that really wasn't there in the 3D world. That time is kind of encapsulated in that moment that they're doing that type of work. Um, Author Preston Dennett, he actually has many books. He's authored many, and he does have one that talks about these types of benevolent facilitation of somebody's physical conditions. And it's not as rare as you may think it is. So, if I heard this story years ago, I said, that's really weird. But then you start hearing these things, and it encompasses everybody from 4-year-old children to 80-year-old adults. I mean, they've had these experiences, and all they know is somebody came to visit. They're not from around here, and that situation physically they were dealing with is no longer there after that experience. So that's exactly what I experienced, and ever since then, yeah, I've been kind of telling that story and know that other people have had the same thing as well.
Now, you're still in communication with these beings today?
I believe they are the same ones. Yes.
How do you communicate with them?
Typically, it is, and I always, whenever I get that question, I never always shy away. And this goes for craft that I've seen in the sky my whole life. Photographed them, I've recorded them, video. I have a lot of footage, broad daylight sightings. It's kind of the same thing. It's a knowing. I always hesitate to say telepathy because I think that word gets thrown around too much these days. And it's really, for me, it's just accessing information that's kind of out there in the field, maybe, and it's being presented to you, but it's always of your free will. Like you could listen to it, you can take it for what it's worth, or you can just throw it away. But it is a knowing. It's so the communication I found is it's not verbal, it's not always telepathic. I think people tend to use the word telepathic as a blanket word now. It's just like, oh, I knew it, so that's what it was. I don't always think that. I think it's just a knowing, and whether it's people have things either implanted or offered to them, because everything in the field is available. It just depends on if we want to take advantage of that. Do we want to use this bit of information? Can you say it's your higher self? You could say that too, but I think your higher self is in contact with these forms of information, these beings, and it does depend on what beings these are. I mean, they could be bodiless, ultra dimensional, 8th, 9th, 10th dimension. I don't know that they don't need a body, but there's information that can be passed on, and I think that's really where I get my information when they see fit. That can go anywhere from, the state of the world, or maybe you shouldn't go to this place today, or it comes in so many forms. You learn to discern what information is and what to do with it. I mean, that's really the best way I can describe it.
You got involved in crop circles or crop formations. Did they lead you in that direction?
I would say yes. The reason I say yes is there was a communication. At the time, I was living in a city called Chandler, Arizona, suburb of Phoenix. And I was spending, I think, 3-day weekend in Sedona, which is more 2 hours north. And I kind of did what so many of us do in our lives, depending on what we're going through in our life at the time. If we're experiencing, trouble, bad relationship, my job, whatever it may be, we tend to look to the sky and just ask, whatever it is we believe in, what the creator of all is, and we say, geez, what am I supposed to be doing? Like, this didn't work out. I'm at a loss. Show me what I'm supposed to be doing. And I did that and didn't really think too much of it. Went back home, resumed the daily grind, going to work. And days later, I drove by some of the last remaining farmland where I lived in Chandler. It was a new subdivision. Things were being built up. This was the mid 2000s, so it would have been 2007, 2008, that area. And driving through the remaining farmland, I noticed something in a field. And I had already had experience with that in California. So I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit. But to answer your question, even before I moved to Arizona, I had experiences with crop formations, starting to do that field work. And I just felt I was, and it sounds silly to some people, like divinely guided to do that work and at least get inside of those and communicate with that energy. It's funny, whenever you bring up crop formations and I talk about my field work and research, people say, oh, well, then you've been to the UK. That's where all of those are, right? Actually, no, I've never been to the UK. And the crop formations that I have been inside of and done field research and field work in have been in California and Arizona. So that kind of blows people away a little bit, because that's not the typical location for crop formations. But they are. It's a global phenomenon, and that's where I happened to be living at the time, in California. And I kind of got my feet wet and did the research, and I got to see the difference between authentic formations and man-made formations. And I can tell you the majority that I was in were authentic.
Now, when you're using the word crop formations, Do you mean crop circles, or are they different from that?
Moving into the 2000s, we started to get out of the simple circles, started to get more complex, and then they started to turn more into geometrical sacred geometry formations rather than simple circles. So I would say back then I kind of dropped the whole crop circles because I would say as a humanity collective, we've moved beyond the circles, much more complex. So yeah, that's a good question. I've gotten that a couple of times. Crop formations are just a more advanced level of crop circle.
How do you tell the difference between man-made and ET made?
Yeah, great question. And I think that's probably the main question and the answer explanation that I hope that most people get out of my presentations of the past, current ones, is that there is a major difference between man-made and authentic. I've taken a little bit of flack over the years from the field artists, which there are some amazing field artists, as well as people who are, staunch believers that everything in the field is from another worldly source or another worldly creator. Unfortunately, these days, the majority of crop formations are man-made. Um, the phenomenon itself started to slow down in the 90s, early 2000s, mid 2000s. Some will even say, like, I'll call him my colleague, although we haven't worked together, Freddie Silva. He agrees, and we share the same opinion, that it started to really become man-made, almost everything, by the time 2005, 2010 came around. The artists are amazing, but the artists have not been able to duplicate what you're asking. The real changes with an authentic, which simply means non-man-made, the internal biophysical, biochemical changes of the crop bear no resemblance to a man-made formation. So man-made, they're crushing, they are ropes and planks and all sorts of devices to just flatten it. When you go into an authentic formation, there is an energy, a measurable energy. Biophysicist, the late Dr. William Levengood, whom I worked in conjunction with in the 2007, 2008 formation here in Arizona, he's always been talked badly about. They said, oh, he wasn't qualified. He had a PhD, but he wasn't qualified to do that lab work. Well, he had his own lab in Michigan, Pinelandia Labs. He worked in conjunction with amazing individuals. He had hundreds of peer-reviewed articles that were in, Science magazine, Nature magazine, and you don't get peer-reviewed and published if you're not qualified to do that work. And Levengood was more than qualified. So he really liked the plasmavortice theory, where things were coming down from the atmosphere, creating these then simple circles. Levengood never said who was behind it. He just said, the things that I'm looking at in the lab, including the samples that I sent him of the formation that I found in Arizona, he said, this is not man-made. No, this is measurable science. The mitochondria has changed. The respiration of the plant is measurable. Everything internal has changed. The growth patterns, the germination of the seeds that were taken from an affected crop grow differently when you germinate them. They're stronger. They don't need as much light. They don't need as much water. They're super seeds for the most part. And this is because they have been exposed to that energy that created that formation. So when you have seeds from a man-made crushed formation and you compare it to an authentic one, there's no comparison. I mean, it's like looking at a human being and a mannequin and, opening up the human and opening up the mannequin, there's nothing the same inside. Visually, from a distance, maybe up close, they're going to resemble one another, but the real work is done on the inside. And that's really what I've kind of come under attack from the field artists, mostly in the UK, that they think people who believe in any kind of phenomena like that is crazy. It's all man-made. They're artists. They're amazing artists, and you can't tell them anything. So I've been called some names. But on the flip side of that, when I tell people who believe in the phenomena, like I do, there is a real phenomena, they get upset when I say there's amazing field artists, or some of the new ones that I've seen on social media, those are man-made. Actually know who the artist was or is. They don't want to hear that. And then they think I'm trying to debunk it. They think I'm playing both sides of the coin, and that's just not it. There is a real phenomena. I've experienced it, and it's just not as prominent or as prevalent as it once was, unfortunately. But there does reside a real phenomena.
Did you take pictures of any of these formations yourself?
I did. I used those in my presentations, and it's really to show the differences. Like I took video, I narrated a lot, and you can see the difference in things up close. Now, when you're looking at it from a distance and you see these posted pictures online, I have to give credit to the field artists that do exist out there doing these things sometimes. They're amazing. Visually, you can't tell the real one from the man-made one anymore. That's actually where the crux of this whole topic is now for me, and I get very frustrated because very well-intentioned people are looking at these pictures now, and everything that's in a field is seen as real, meaning from otherworldly, and they just aren't, unfortunately. But that's when the passing of Dr. Levengood, not too many years ago, when I worked with him, when I worked in conjunction on that same formation with Linda Moulton Howe, she was the one who was responsible for getting all my samples, FedExed overnight to the lab. She played a huge role in the formation that I did the field work on here in Arizona. And, the conversations I had with him, he was very forthcoming in saying that, the real ones don't bear any resemblance, and you're going to take a lot of flack for this. He took a lot of flack for it. And he said, you're going to have people who believe that everything is authentic and nothing is man-made. And he just basically said he used to go through that all the time, and I'm going to have to deal with that. So just to get used to it and don't take it personal. And he was right. he was right. So it's frustrating because with his passing, there has been no proper lab work to differentiate which one is real, which one is man-made. And that's really, that is very frustrating for me, as you can tell by the way that I'm trying to respond to this. Nobody does any science behind it anymore. And that's where the truth lies. I mean, it is absolutely provable in a court of law that real authentic formations were not made by human beings here. So it's very frustrating.
What is Linda's take on all this?
I would say her opinion back then is the same as it is now. And, I can only assume, since the last time that she spoke about this topic, is it's not only otherworldly, but it's also, there's an area there that's a gray area that it's consciousness. It could very well reside within Mother Earth herself. If you look at the location, say in southern England, only because that's where the majority of them come down at, that they always reside near or on ley lines, very strong magnetic, like Michael and Mary lines, ley lines, geodetic lines that are right on top of underground chalk aquifers, which contain, chalk, silica, flowing water. Those are all very conductive aspects. And, when you couple consciousness with conductive materials, I mean, it can create things. I mean, there's patterns, there's cymatic patterns, sound, vibration, frequency. It is all contained in the authentic formation. And that is what lacks in man-made stuff. Levitt also realized in his studies that a lot of meteoric powder and meteoric, I would say even like spheres, like tiny, tiny, like ball bearing spheres, molten spheres, were all over a lot of the formations that he studied and brought into the lab. And I think he did scientific research and lab work on over 400, 500 formations. So he was no, beginner in any of this. He was very seasoned. He knew what to look for. He saw patterns. And there was a lot of evidence that things came from the upper atmosphere. Uh, elongated nodes of the plant, expulsion cavities, things in the soil, dehydration of the soil. There's so many things that are measurable of a very high energetic heat, very fast, in the microwave range, that occurred, that changes these, the biophysical, biochemical aspects of the plant. And it's an amazing phenomenon when you really dig deep. And I think Linda educated me on that quite a bit, because she actually had a book out years ago that it was like crop formations and orbs, or something to that effect, mysterious orbs, which are seen around formations and fields as well. I've witnessed them. So there's a lot going on with the authentic phenomenon.
What messages do you think the creators of the authentic ones are trying to share with us?
That's a really good question, Jeff, and I think it's multifaceted. But for me, what I have experienced the most is, I know a lot of the left brain, science, very, very intelligent individuals out there, professors whom I've spoken to over the years, who take this phenomena seriously as well. They really try to decode the shape. They see things like the Metatron's cube, sacred geometries, the angles, the perfect union between masculine, feminine. I mean, they really going hard on the left brain decoding. But for me, and this has been my interactions with beings, the ones that we speak about, the knowing, and some beings I don't even know their name or their race. I get that question too. Who are they? The Pleiadians? Most of the time I don't know, but there's that communication. I have gotten from that communication, as well as my higher self in meditation. I'm a Reiki master. I do energy work. Everything seems to come down to accessing that information and these symbols that I've seen. And I have so many, I use symbols in a lot of my work and my practice. Symbols hold, and any symbologist will share this opinion, is that we can look at one symbol and access, that information of thousands of words. And I think the majority of these crop formations, authentic ones, it really happens upon sight. Like when you sit and you look at these pictures of them, or you sit inside and you meditate, you feel that energy, there is something taking place right there. I've learned to stay away too much from the left brain stuff and trying to figure it out, because I don't think that's how this works. Is there a place for that conversation? Absolutely. But I think information is being passed on to us through symbols and what some people call downloads.
Now you're saying that the amount of authentic ones has decreased and the man-made ones have increased?
Correct. Correct.
So why do you think they're not choosing to communicate with us in that particular way?
Well, what's interesting is when people, I don't talk about this much because I can't really prove anything other than my conversation with individuals. I think there's three aspects, actually, to this phenomenon. And it kind of muddies the waters, but then again, it kind of explains a few other things too. For example, the first one is the authentic phenomenon, which has been around for hundreds of years. If you do your research in the 1600s, there was formations. They called them something different, but the experience, the description, everything is the same. Authentic, there's man-made, the field artist, and then there's a third that's not talked about too much. I've touched upon it here and there, but I haven't gone much into it. And that third aspect is very similar to automatic writing. So for people who are familiar with automatic writing, it is a way of, it's kind of a way of channeling. So again, it could be your higher self. It could be other dimensional beings who are, giving you the information, and as a receiver, because we are a receiver, we just bring in information. The automatic writing in the way of a crop formation, I have personally spoken to a couple individuals who do reside in the UK who don't really take sides at all. They're not the angry ones trying to prove a point and telling you that you're wrong. They literally get this information. They'll get this particular symbol. They will go out there and make a formation, and it's man-made, but as they explain it, it is from a higher place. So that kind of changes things a little bit. So if there are people out there who are, and it's usually not the angry ones, because they're doing it, they're very much a self-server, who are angry and telling everybody in the world is wrong and they're the only right ones. These individuals are creating these things at the direction of another consciousness. So yes, there's three. It's very rarely spoken about, but that is a very good question that you asked, Jeff, because there is a third aspect of the phenomenon.
Have you had any contact with any particular race of ETs?
Yes, and I would say it took me, well, up until very recent, 5-6 years ago, the beings that I encountered when I was 12 were one of many Arcturian beings. Of course, people are using these names, very like it's the only one. That's like saying, the human being. Well, there's all very, very different human beings on this planet. There's very different Arcturians. There's very different Pleiadians. All of the ones that people know about, there's numerous ones. And I believe the Arcturians that I encountered and facilitated that physical upgrade when I was 12, it's a group called the Ohorai. And the Ohorai, I only started to get information on them, like I said, 5 years ago. And then recently there's a book out, a Galactica Encyclopedia. I don't know if I can say the author's name, but that's the name of the book. they made reference to the Arcturian Ohorai, and they're known for their healing facilitation. They're known for this frequency and just a whole other upgrade of knowledge in the area of health and wellness type of thing. So just doing my own research, going in through meditation, I believe that the Arcturian Ohorai is the race of beings that I have interacted with since 12. And there was another race right around 2020. And this was an interesting one because I never knew who they were, because the name I was getting was never correct. It sounded like it. But when I was in the Bay Area and I was doing some facilitation work there as well, probably the most meditation that I'd ever done in my life. This was like, at least 2 hours a day. I started to get things coming in from other places that was a little bit new for me. And that race of beings, they are called the Azez. Now, the name that kept coming through in meditation was like Arze or Aze or Ozzy, or I had no clue what it was. And it turned out it's a group called the Azez. They are, the only reason I know this is there's only one book that I'm aware of. Because of course, when you start getting the messages, you start looking for confirmation, validation. Am I nuts? Am I making it up? Is it something that I heard? Was it some information somewhere else that was just front loaded? Which that's a remote viewing term. When things are front loaded, like means you already know a little bit about something. Well, I didn't know anything about this group. And turns out that they're beings from allegedly from a star called Azez, which is over 300 light years away from here. They are fifth dimensional. They are light bodies as far as I know. And I really didn't know much more than that. But when I figured out the name Azez, I found just one book called Azez Medicine. I said, well, I got to get this book. And read the book. A lot of stuff in that book resonated, made a lot of sense. There was things about the great central sun. There was stuff about interacting with beings on the cusp of their consciousness evolution. They start with individual beings and it kind of moves to a collective, but they help planets move forward, but never obviously infringing upon their free will. So the information is there, the assistance is there if you choose to reach out. And I had a nice conversation one day for hours with the author of the Azez Medicine. Her name is Faye Thompson. Faye is an amazing woman. She lives in Canada. And we talked about these beings and compared notes. And needless to say, I was kind of blown away because, when you get thoughts like this and you think about things, like, it's a little far-fetched, but, I'm open. When you get confirmation, I always say I'm like a kid on Christmas morning. It never gets old. Never gets old when I get the feeling that I'm supposed to go outside and view a craft and film it, and it always works out perfectly. It's there's nothing like it. So I've learned to really know what that feeling feels like. The gratitude, the thankfulness that I have, that I've kind of learned to interact with this. And I like to think it's, for my own growth, positive growth, evolution, and helping other people who have a lot of the same questions that I did. And that's what I do in a lot of my facilitation outside of my day job, is help individuals who are just kind of breaking into it, really have questions, and just helping the average person. And there's a really big sense of joy and, like I said, gratitude when I can assist other people with the things that I've experienced.
We're going to take a look at a couple of your videos here, Michael. Tell us what we're supposed to see in this one.
Okay. Well, this one right here, I was actually eating lunch, looking out the window, and I started to get that feeling that I've grown accustomed to. And outside, it just appeared right outside my window. I call it a sky pearl. I mean, it looks just like a pearl. And to me, those are more scouts. They're not actually manned, but it's a smaller scout from a much larger craft up in the atmosphere. And I was just they let me know that they were there.
All right.
And I filmed that, and there's a plane that's involved, and it disappears when the plane goes by, and then it reappears after the plane passes.
Cool. Let's take a look.
Michael FreeHawk 323, Sunday afternoon.
There you go. So there's the plane.
Got a
and
video
you
here.
see the shimmering. Where'd it go?
Of this plane and object. There it is, just glimmering.
There he is.
See it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, lost it.
And of course, I lost it there.
That's pretty
But
cool.
there he is. There. But I love seeing those kinds because they're very aware of the planes, and they will blink out. They'll wait for them to pass, and whether they're cloaking themselves or whether they're literally
Seems like it's
kind of
a little bit
dematerializing,
too much
they
for
get out of the way and wait for that plane to pass.
All right. Tell us about what we'll see in this one.
Okay. And there was two hovering. The funny part about this one is I was with a woman who was actually writing a book. I was going to write the foreword to her book, and she had started to get information from an Arcturian collective as well. And I said, well, you know what? Let's go talk about your book. Let's go walk around the lake and have a nice conversation. And I have a feeling that maybe some of our friends will make themselves known during our conversation. So as we were walking, I mean, we were looking at the sky, talking, looking at the sky, and then I think right about that time is when these two spheres appeared and graced us with their presence.
Cool. Let's check it out.
Okay. I find it interesting that they are kind of keeping their distance from one another.
We're trying to spot it.
I have no idea if I'm kind of shooting blind right now.
I know.
Yeah,
But
the
the
sun was
space
in my eyes. I
between
couldn't
is-
really see it. I knew the direction they were in,
They're-
waiting for the sun to shine off them.
Looks like they're getting a little closer, and they're not so erratic. If they were balloons, they're not all over the place.
Even though they were faint, I could see them.
There are two.
Okay, well,
God,
I'm totally blind.
usually they're
Can't see anything.
really prominent in this video. It's funny that we can't see them.
Have the Arcturians or the Zez ever given you a message for humanity?
Whew, yeah. It's probably the same one as many others have gotten. So when I receive that message, it really is about our consciousness. It's interesting because let me step back, because usually people go, yeah, we're going to destroy the world, and they tell us to take care of the planet. And, that is true. I have gotten that. But the emphasis for me is really more of a internal working on your own ascension, your internal ascension. And again, it's another catchphrase word that goes around a lot these days, is the ascension. The ascension really, it's a consciousness expansion. It's going outside of the 3D brain and realizing that we access everything that's out there. I mean, we are a part of everything out there. I've gotten that, you know, this planet has been here for millions, billions of years. It's going to be fine without us. It can heal itself. Usually people go, well, you know, we can blow it up. Well, of course we can. We have that capability now. I don't see the main message as being save the planet. I say take care of the planet. Saving the planet has got that under control. It's been doing that long before we were here. So it's really emphasizing our own, cultivating our own internal growth. Consciousness always comes up, knowing that we are amazing, intentional beings. They are definitely part of our cosmic family. Really remembering who we are, because the moment that we were born on this planet, we've been told essentially absolutely the very opposite of what and who we are. That's still one of the biggest lies and secrets on this planet that they're still keeping going this day. You know, we are not who we've been told we are. And the beings that I've interacted with, the beings that other people have interacted with, they are a part of our cosmic family. We all come from the same source, the same one infinite creator. But along the way, there's been a lot of little g's, you know, little gods who have manipulated, changed, upgraded, and that main message has been, you know, realize who you are and how powerful you are, where you come from, because you're not getting that story here in this life, that's for sure. So thinking much further above the 3D realm that we reside in is really the message that I've gotten. Like rise above all that, and the ascension that you speak about will come on its own.
This came from the Ojai?
This is the Ohorai.
Ohorai, okay.
The Azez, they speak more about it's more just of our personal evolution. They don't talk about the collective much, although I believe they're a collective. But I can understand that. And you know, because if the old saying, if we take care of our stuff, we take care of our own home, our own families, and you know, that ripples out to the world, that causes that effect. So really, it's, some people say, oh, it's kind of selfish, like they're just telling you to think about yourself. That's not what it is. It's really cultivating yourself, which does dovetail with the Ohorai. The Ohorai, I think they're more, what I call, they're more kind of masters of the peace, wellness, ascension of entire planets. And the Azez, they seem like they're more just energetic and more of a conscious collective of making sure that we know that they're there for support, and they'll give us little friendly nudges here and there. So a bit of the same, but it's, I think it's worded very differently. It's interesting that it is worded, not until you actually ask that question, that their messages feel different. Like there's a different vibe to it, and you kind of have to learn how to discern what that exactly means a little bit. It's interesting. You gave me something to think about, Jeff.
Michael, if people want to find out more about what you're up to, and if they want to contact you, how should they do that? Do your YouTube channel or a website?
I would say the YouTube channel, that one is definitely that's something that I've been meaning to spend a little more time on. So I wouldn't use that as the actual contact point. I'm pretty much on all social media platforms. Michael FreeHawk, I think I'm the only one out there. So if you type in Michael FreeHawk, I will pop up. I have, you know, email, website. So if the listeners want to contact me, they can shoot me an email. My answer emails, I'm very accessible. That is freehawkenergy@gmail.com. And then if they'd like to go to my website and they'll see also what I do outside of the day job, you can go to my website at freehawkhealing.com. And you can interact with me there as well. And yeah, we can keep in touch and exchange stories. Anybody wants to talk about things, I'm more than open to that. I love chatting, just like we are. And I think we need to talk more about it. So yeah, so that's why I am honored to be on this show with you, Jeff, because I think you're doing a great job at facilitating that communication with so many different people, and you know, I think it's pretty unanimous across the board from what I've seen on comments when I watch some of your guests, and people do appreciate that you have this platform, you allow guests to speak. Not all podcast hosts conduct their podcast the same way, but you have a very good way of doing that. So I thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Before we wrap it up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
No, I'd just say that everything, I'm a firm believer, and this continues every day of my life on this beautiful planet. Everything is always in divine order. No matter how crazy it looks, it transcends your opinions and your people's political affiliations. That's just such distortion and distraction. The real world is so much further and beyond what we are experiencing right now. That word again, cultivate yourself, really go within, ask for help, and nothing is really happening a moment later or a moment sooner than it's meant to. And that's always helped me, through tough times, that this is happening for a reason, and we just need to hang in there and watch it unfold into something beautiful.
Michael, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Jeff.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.